Hi, it's Joanne with Mutteritaville Studio here. I am doing a quick video on a stencil, a little bit of instruction for a wonderful customer who trusted me with a special clock stencil for her. So I'm going to do a quick tutorial because she's going to be spray painting her clock. And I wanted to explain how I put this together and a few tips and tricks. Now, on this stencil, we have used a lighter weight 5mm Mylar. So, due to that, I suggest using some sort of a spray adhesive on the back of this stencil when before applying it to the clock. Make sure you take the adhesive and the stencil to a well-ventilated area. I often just go outside and place down a card and spray there. Now, you're going to turn your stencil over. You're going to give short sprays on the back of the stencil with the adhesive. Allow that adhesive to set up for a little bit before applying the stencil to the clock. Now, some other things to consider when you are painting a round item and you have a round stencil. You're wanting to, now this should center fine because I have built this stencil to be exactly the size of the round our customer is working with. It's 29 1/4. You want to make sure that you line up your center. So I would even recommend marking at the center of the 12 and the center of the 6 and lining it up with the center of the clock. This has been built with overlap so that when you spray paint, there should be no portion of the clock showing. Now, maybe I should get down. I'm up on a ladder to try and get the full overhead on this, and this is not all properly lined up. So let's try this a little differently. Let's take this off of here. So we have the two round portions here. So we're going to want to apply one onto the clock first. And then once you've got it positioned, you're going to want to position the second piece, and there is overlap here. You're going to want to make sure that your edge is perfectly aligned, because that way you know that everything is set up properly. I would recommend putting some painter's tape to hold this seam in place without going over the number 8 there. Once you get that all positioned and you know it's secure on your clock, let's come in with the compass rose, and you want your north lined up and centered on your 12 and your south centered on your 6. I know this is not the best, but you'll see that your overlap, again, is even. And again, I would recommend putting some painter's tape around without going over any of the numbers. So this should cover up all the lower clock areas that you don't want to receive paint. Make sure all of these areas are well secured, and then you're going to want, if you're spray painting, you may also want to apply either some paper, newspaper, or something beyond this so that it doesn't overspray doesn't get onto anything beyond your clock surface. Make sure your spray paint, you're going to want to spray paint. I think they usually recommend about 12 inches away from your surface, and you're going to want to make short, quick sprays. and you're going to want to make sure. The reason I suggested the lighter weight Mylar on this is so that your Mylar is really close to your surface, so you're not going to have a lot of like gaps or anything underneath that the paint can get under. I don't typically use spray paint on this sort of thing. I hand paint and swirl with a stencil brush, with a very dry brush, and if that's something that you'd prefer to do, I can give you a little, there may even be a video on our channel where you're doing that, where I'm showing that, can I pause this? I do apologize if this is moving around a lot. I was trying to get enough height to be able to show the whole stencil because it is almost 30 inches, but this is the type of brush I use for my stenciling. It's a dome top stencil brush. You load your paint. This is just a simulation because I'm like, if you want to change your mind on how you're doing this, I take this, I load it with paint, and then I offload the excess paint onto a paper towel so that my brush is really dry. And then you can either tap lightly to apply the paint, or I will often do a swirl type technique. And it is an extreme dry brush application so that there is no bleed underneath. So that's just something to consider if you prefer, but you can also spray paint, and I just recommend making sure that your stencil is well adhered to the surface with some stencil adhesive and then some painter's tape just to lock everything together. I hope these tips help, and I sure hope your clock turns out the way you're hoping. Have a great day.